Hey, what's up, Nashville? This is Beau Beach with the Free Speech Podcast presented by Beechwood Commercial Real Estate Brokerage, your commercial real estate broker if you are a seller in Nashville or the Southeast. As always, we're going to bring you the top stories of the week, focusing on Nashville commercial real estate, business, culture, politics, and even a little sports. We've got some interesting stories for you today. I'm going to run through and summarize all those stories we're about to cover, and then we'll get right into it. First, I'm going to tell you the story of a foreclosed office property near the airport. I'm going to walk you through how these type of foreclosures work, and we'll look at the numbers there. Next, a car-focused private social club set to open in Midtown. So a private social club developed around the love for automobiles. Next, Opry Entertainment takes full control of the Ascend Amphitheater for the next 10 years, and they're planning to use that space differently. I'll tell you that story. Briefly, I'm going to give you a Nashville home sales update. Of course, we're not in the business of selling homes, but most of our listeners are homeowners, and I think we can bring you just the basics of what's going on in the residential market. Next, a lower Broadway honky tonk hits the market, and it's unusual in that it's very, very large, multi-story entertainment complex that's already been fully renovated. So it's kind of a turnkey, move right in type of lower Broadway type space, which is not what you see hit the market. While many lower Broadway properties do trade, many of them trade in a state of needing updating or a property that's already fully leased. This property is move-in ready for the new operator, which is unusual. I'll tell you that story. How much would you pay for 1,300 square feet of land on 2nd Avenue? When you're talking about land, 1,300 square feet doesn't amount to much. I'll let you know what that sliver of land downtown just traded for. And last, the Patsy Cline Museum downtown on Broadway is closing. I'll walk you through what they have planned there. So first, let's get into our story of a foreclosed office property. An office building near the Nashville airport is in the hands of its lender after a recent foreclosure sale. The Commerce Center East office building located at 100 Centerview Drive was bought by the site's lender at a foreclosure sale. The site's lender, known as Prime Finance Partners, purchased the building for $19.5 million through a credit bid, which allows a lender to bid the amount they are owed on the property. So the lender bid the amount that they are owed on the property, and then they had no competition above that price point, so they became the owner. Boston-based Albany Road Real Estate Partners was the previous owner of the office property. Albany Road bought the 239,000 square foot building for $42.5 million in 2016. The three-story building, located just a few miles from the airport, was fully leased at that time. So, a fully leased office building sells in 2016, not that long ago, for $42.5 million, is just recently purchased by its lender for $19.5 million. The property is home to the headquarters of Nashville-based Higher Right Holding Corp., as well as other tenants. It's unclear how many other tenants there are on the property. In 2021, Albany Road secured a $36 million loan on the property from MetLife Investment Management, the original lender. MetLife transferred its interest in the property to Prime Financial Partners, which then became the new lender of record. So what that means is this property traded in 2016 for $42 million with $36 million of debt. That debt was placed by MetLife. At some point this this property became distressed. MetLife, not the type of owner that wants to show that kind of distress on their balance sheet, so they flipped the note to more of an investor type lender known as Prime Financial Partners. So MetLife exited the deal. They sold their rights to the note to Prime Financial Partners. So what's interesting to me here, right? So the original buyer in 2016 only put 15% down and financed the balance with MetLife. At some point, not at some point, in 2021, MetLife sold the note to Prime Financial Partners. In 2025, Prime Financial Partners foreclosed and took the asset. What's interesting here is if they have a credit bid equal to the amount that the lender is owed on the property of $19.5 million, how did that debt go from $36 million down to $19.5 million? That is unusual here, because even if Prime Financial Partners paid $19.5 million for the note, right? The note is still due of $36 million. So MetLife sold their interest in the note, but the note with the borrower is still $36 million. So I don't know how we got from $36 million to $19.5 million, which is supposedly the amount of the debt that the current lender is owed on the property. It's hard to imagine a scenario whereby the owner of that property, the distressed property, is really paying down that note to such a great extent. So that part is unclear to me. We don't have that information. But what I think is interesting is $42.5 million in 2016. The same property trades in 2025 for $19.5 million, the amount of the outstanding debt on the property, with the creditor being the only bidder, meaning the market valued the property at less than $19.5 million. So a huge change in valuation here for this 239,000 square foot office building near the airport. So that's the story I have for you there. Next, a car-focused private social club to open, known as One Garage, is Nashville's newest private social club. Located under the Nashville sign at 1616 Broadway, One Garage offers auto-moto enthusiasts. So that perhaps means automobile and motorcycle enthusiasts, auto-moto enthusiasts, a networking hub, upscale lounge, and music venue all in one. Quote, "We felt there was a hunger in Nashville for a comfortable, elevated environment that caters to individuals who want to dive in, explore, and create a communal setting. Next door, Lola's European Cafe offers cocktails, gelato, coffee, sandwiches, and more." So the idea is the next door neighbor is going to be providing the food service for the club. This is more of just a hang spot. Lounge access day passes can be booked online for $50 as occupancy allows. So $50 just to walk in the door and hang out in this moto inspired private social club. You know, this to me feels like a little bit of a stretch. You know, but anytime we're talking about cars, vintage cars, usually we're talking about a group of people that has a lot of money. So a lot of guys that are older, up in age, perhaps retired, they go all in on these vintage cars. And perhaps someone with a lot of money is really kind of just making their baby here, their private social club for them and their friends and others that want to participate. But to me, this doesn't sound like a real viable business. You know, there's been an uptick in private social clubs in Nashville. I just don't know how much interest there really is. I don't know how people with children have any time to get to private social clubs. So now you're picking from people that are either pre-children stage or empty nesters, which takes your potential clientele down pretty substantially. So, For me, this seems like a stretch. This might be a rich, older person's kind of private club that they've always dreamed of having. And to that, I say, God bless. I mean, if this is something that you've always dreamt of doing and you got the cash to do it, by all means, make it happen. But as a viable business opportunity, it doesn't pass the sniff test for me. But nonetheless, very, very cool. Wish them well. I thought that was an interesting story to share with you all. So now, the Ascend Amphitheater, right? This is an outdoor music venue located downtown, owned by Metro. And what they do is they sign 10-year leases with third parties to operate it, right? Opry Entertainment Group, the entertainment arm of Ryman Hospitality Properties, has been awarded the bid, valued at $41 million, by Metro to operate the downtown venue for the next decade. So, Opry coughs up $41 million to lease that venue for the next 10 years, beating out other bidders, Live Nation and AEG. So some heavy hitters that were bidding on this lease. The local Opry Entertainment Group took it down. Quote, "We think it's a little sinful that this business is basically dark 330 days a year. What we really want to do is make sure that this facility is activated in a broad way, and that is what we're going to be working on over the course of the next 12 months. Opry Entertainment Group intends to make Ascend more of an all-inclusive park and destination beyond just the nights it hosts concerts by extending the greenway, among other things." Ascend originally opened in 2015 and has been operated by Live Nation, who beat Ryman on the bid 10 years ago. Ascend joins Opry Entertainment Group's Nashville venue portfolio of Ryman Auditorium, Grand Ole Opry, Category 10 in partnership with Luke Combs, and Ole Red in partnership with Blake Shelton. So, I think most people understand that Ryman Hospitality Properties is a heavy hitter in Nashville, right? Certainly in the music scene and in the tourism scene. And now they're involving themselves in Ascend Amphitheater, and their concept is we want to activate this space much more often than it's been activated before. So instead of doing 35 shows a year and letting the space sit dark for 330 days, we're going to be activating this space much, much more often. So it gets, more visitors, more use, more revenue, right? So they're going to have to come up with something to make back that 41 million plus make a profit on top of that. And the business plan here is, hey, we've got to use this space more often. If we're going to lease it for $41 million, we've really got to put it to work. So I think this is a really cool thing for the community because this is a very cool space that's going to be activated much more often. So look for much more going on in the coming years at Ascend Amphitheater. I think that is a big win for Nashville and Ryman. Don't bet against those guys, man. They're sharp. They've got a lot of money behind them, and they generally perform. So I think Ascend is on its way up. Next, the Nashville home sales update. So first I would tell you there are 5 months of inventory now available on the market, which means if not a single additional home was listed for sale, it would take buyers 5 months to clear all the current inventory available, which means inventory is up, right? Homes sold in March were on the market for an average of 53 days. So that's from the day they hit the market to the day the deal closes. Usually it takes 30 days to close. So most of those deals are getting put into contract within the first few weeks. The median price for a single family home was $490,000. For a condominium, it was $347,000, which is slightly lower than a year ago. So the deals that traded in March traded at slightly lower prices than March of last year. And of course, active listings are up. They're up substantially, 31%. So there are 31% more residential properties on the market today than there were a year ago. So I don't know really how to make sense of the active listing stuff. Again, I'm not in this business. So what's causing people to list their properties for sale now? It certainly isn't rates. Rates really haven't moved. Supposedly the market is a little bit skittish with everything that's going on at a federal level. So I'm not sure what is really causing the uptick in inventory. I also think it's interesting that while the price change from a year ago was small, it's still negative, right? So, I would have predicted that home values have a long way to go in Nashville, but we've stalled out and we've actually retreated a little bit in terms of pricing. And with active listings going up, generally, if demand remains constant and supply goes up, price goes down, right? So I'm not sure what to make of it. I haven't given a lot of thought because it's not the business that we're in, but I do think it's interesting that active listings, home listings are up in Nashville 31% year over year. If anybody has any thoughts on why that is, give me a shout out, let me know. Next, a lower Broadway honky tonk hits the market. This building, known as the Basin Allen Building, which is located at 105 Broadway and houses the Nashville Underground Honky Tonk, is listed for sale. This property, about 55,000 square feet and 6 stories tall. The building was constructed in 1935 as a seed warehouse, which is wild. A warehouse for seed on Lower Broadway, is owned by singer-songwriters Gavin DeGraw and Joey DeGraw, who paid $30 million for the 0.2-acre property in 2023. The building is home to Nashville Underground, which the DeGraw brothers opened in 2018. So how this played out is the Nashville Underground was the tenant for a number of years. They ultimately stepped up and then bought the building and became the tenant and the owner. The property neighbors Acme Feed and Seed and Whiskey River Saloon. Nashville Underground has leased the entire building since 2011, so that's quite a run. 14 straight years occupying there. They also invested more than $14 million into the building to renovate and reconstruct the structure into a multi-level bar, restaurant, and live music venue. So we're talking real money here. $14 million in improvements and a $30 million purchase price. The building is marketed without a lease, right? So that is telling, right? So if you're marketing a property like this, you want to know who your likely buyer is. Your likely buyer here is an occupant, right? Someone that's going to occupy the space. So it's being marketed without a lease. And the broker that's marketing it says it's up to the future owner of the building to decide the future operations of the site. In January, Rising Cane's founder Todd Graves paid a record-breaking $75 million for the Lower Broadway building home to Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville. The purchase price set the per square foot record for a Broadway building at $2,870 per square foot. I would tell you that's not necessarily an apples to apples comparison because that building was fully occupied and leased and cash flowing. This building is going to be delivered effectively vacant. So I don't think we're going to be touching those types of prices over $2,800 a square foot, but it is going to be a massive, massive price. And this is what the brokers are saying about it. We've simply never seen an opportunity like this that allows for this type of speed to occupancy for a newer owner and concept. So speed to occupancy means, hey, you're in the business of selling overpriced drinks to tourists. If you buy another building nearby that needs substantial amount of work, you are going to be waiting quite a while before you sell that first beer. Speed to occupancy means, hey, this thing is built out. You can redecorate and be open for business in weeks. And that's the selling pitch on this property. There is no stated asking price on the property, which is customary for some of these high-priced assets downtown. What they're really trying to do is create a competitive bidding situation whereby each buyer submits the amount of money that they're willing to pay for the property, and then they would create effectively a bidding war to see who is willing to step up and pay the highest price. So I know that is a frustrating part of the business that a lot of people don't like. Anytime a property is listed without a formal asking price, that is a turnoff for a lot of different buyers. Nevertheless, that trend is really caught on in Nashville. You see it often. So the higher price, the more in demand the asset, the more likely there's no stated asking price. And they want you to reach out to them, communicate with them, hear the story, and then submit the bid that you've got in mind for that property. And then once all those bids are in, they'll go back to the higher bidders and see if they can get them up a little bit higher and then maybe close that transaction. How much would you pay for a 1,300 square foot sliver of land on 2nd Avenue? A sliver of 2nd Avenue property located within downtown Nashville's The District has sold for $1.5 million. That is a 0.03 acre parcel of raw land that sits adjacent to the building housing the Lounge at 2nd. The buyer also owns the Lounge at 2nd property, which was originally constructed in the late 1980s to accommodate a McDonald's restaurant. The building most recently housed Guy Fieri's Chicken Guy, and prior to that, Mexican cuisine restaurant El Rey. So, the Lounge at 2nd coughs up $1.5 million for 1,300 square feet next to their existing building. The seller used the just sold sliver for employee parking. The seller paid $280,000 for that sliver of land in 2014. Man, those are the type of investments you want, right? You buy a little parcel of land that's got absolutely no holding costs except for a little bit of property taxes to be paid, no maintenance. For $280,000 11 years ago, you park your car on it for 11 years and you flip it for $1.5 million. That is just about as good as a real estate transaction can go, as long as you had the cash in 2014 and you were patient. Now, last story of the week, I'll tell you the last couple weeks have been a little bit slow in terms of stories that we thought were worthy of sharing with you. So today's kind of a short podcast, but I'd rather keep it short and keep it interesting rather than kind of extend it on without anything really interesting to present you. So this is the last story of the day. Patsy Cline Museum is closing. Icon Entertainment and Hospitality is transforming the Patsy Cline Museum, set to close on May 15th, into a new immersive Johnny Cash Museum experience, including a theater which will debut mid-summer. The Patsy Cline Museum had an 8-year run. Demand continues to increase to the point where we just have no more room. So the Johnny Cash Museum is located right next door. Johnny Cash Museum, much more popular than the Patsy Cline Museum. So the decision was made after 8 years, close down Patsy Cline and expand the Johnny Cash Museum. The new Johnny Cash Museum floor will be around 3,000 additional square feet. It will be completely immersive, allowing guests to see, touch, smell, and feel. In addition to the theater, guests will be able to record a Johnny Cash song. The Johnny Cash Museum first opened in 2013 at 119 3rd Avenue South. Icon Entertainment and Hospitality recently opened Show Pony next door and is working on its second East Nashville concept, which they are calling the Greenwood. So give respect where respect is due. Icon Entertainment and Hospitality, also a heavy hitter in Nashville. I don't think they're on the level of the Ryman Group, but I certainly think they command as much respect. With all their different projects, I'll give you a few ideas of what the Icon Group owns. Nudi's Honky Tonk, Skull's Rainbow Room, House of Cards, Sinatra Bar and Lounge, Southern Turf Lofts, Southern Turf Club, Schulman's Neighborhood Bar, and Tanya Tucker's Tequila Cantina. So these guys are the real deal as well. And just like Ryman, all of their projects, They have big upfront investments. They make them very cool, very unique, very kind of on trend. So they do a great job, and I think they've really added to the variety that you experience on Lower Broadway. So they're not just bars slinging beers, right? They take it to the next level with really unique, immersive concepts that you probably haven't experienced before. And this idea that, you're calling these things museums, right? Well, most museums are owned by municipalities, right? They're owned by government entities. But these are for-profit museums that have done really, really well. And before the Johnny Cash Museum, you really didn't hear about anyone getting in the museum business for profit. It was never really considered a way to make a lot of money. But they did that in a number of different ways. But the one that's really had longevity is the Johnny Cash Museum, which continues to be profitable. So Patsy Cline Museum, 8-year run, very cool idea. You got to change with the times. The food and beverage business, the entertainment business is a fickle business. You can't just kind of set it and forget it. You've always got to be evolving. You're seeing this with a lot of concepts. You see this with a lot of restaurants. Even the most famous restaurants in Nashville over time either need to update and go back to the market with something fresh, or close their doors and let the next guy come in, because over time demand just kind of fades out and you aren't profitable like you once were. So you've always got to be constantly reinvesting in these concepts. And I've said it 100 times, but the food and beverage business is just brutal. It's brutal for so many reasons. It's brutal because of the hours. It's brutal because of the upfront investment you have to make before you make your first sale. It's brutal because of all the employees that are required to operate those venues. It's brutal because of the review business, whereby you have one bad plate go out and all of a sudden it's a real issue from a marketing perspective because you've got that bad review. You've got really high fixed costs and you're just making a little bit of money on every sale that you make. And then if you do really dial it in and get it perfect, just the passing of time requires you to mix it up and start over and do something new and make all new big upfront investments. So I have a absolute respect for anyone that has the guts to get into the food and beverage business. They're right up there in terms of the courage needed with real estate developers, which is a very, very difficult business as well. I think the real estate development business perhaps seems a little bit more glamorous than the food and beverage business. But I will tell you, both are extremely difficult, and anybody that's getting into those businesses and making it happen has a lot of guts, is a hard worker, and has a big appetite for stress, because those are very, very stressful businesses to be in. And if you continue to sign yourself up for those levels of stress over time, you are a very tough, thick-skinned person by the end of it. So that's what I've got for you today, guys. I hope we've brought you a few stories that you learned from, perhaps enjoyed. As always, this episode of the Free Speech Podcast is brought to you by Beechwood's Commercial Real Estate Brokerage, your broker if you are a seller in Nashville or the Southeast. If there's anything that we can do for you to help you understand what it would look like to list and sell your commercial property in today's marketplace, I encourage you to reach out and we'll do our best to help. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.